for all of his life's work to pass into. Now, this website over here says you can download the free public 64-bit operating system, Temple operating system. Now, there's also other various downloads. Terry also adds, I think, like speed updates for Linux, QEMU virtualization. He has like TOS distros, light distros, supplemental distros, which are actually C files. And then he's got like the Temple OS ISO and the ISO Lite. But we're going to download the full fat experience and get the actual Temple OS ISO, which is only 16 megabytes in size. So it's not the largest operating system in the world by far. So we're going to download this, and you might be wondering, Muda, can you run it on actual official hardware? Yeah, actually you can. There's a YouTuber out there that you can actually go to who is showing himself running this exact operating system underneath a ThinkPad, a laptop from like 10 years ago. So it is possible to get this running. I, unfortunately, could not on any of my hardware, simply due to the fact that Temple OS doesn't really work well with like UEFI BIOSes. I don't think it even works well with original legacy BIOSes, simply because there's something in the operating system and in the boot process that just doesn't work well with certain hardware that's now commonplace on systems. So the only way to really use Temple OS, all right, for most people is to run it under a virtual machine, which we are doing. We're running it under VirtualBox. So let's get to it, let's mount it, and let's run this bastard, okay? Now, for virtual machine's sake, all right, what I am running this on is a 6 gigabyte system, so 6 gigs of RAM and 8 cores. The reason I'm giving it 6 gigs is since this is a 64-bit operating system, it should be able to recognize memory values and register them above 3 gigabytes or 3.5 gigabytes. So immediately one thing to consider is Temple OS boots really fast, and obviously I shouldn't be shocked because it's a 16 megabyte operating system, and yeah, it loads up exceptionally quick to a very simplistic 90s GUI that honestly will reflect a tiling manager. That on the right side, it's a basic, directory structure system, and on the left side, a bit of that is also reflected, but you also get asked the question if you want to install this to a hard drive, yes or no. Obviously, I hit yes, it installs really quickly. One thing to note, too, is despite that Terry did advocate using this on a VM, he really doesn't have any form of GPU acceleration, meaning that immediately upon booting, I wasn't able to resize anything on the display. So you can see that I'm trying to do it, like auto-size it or trying to find a resolution prompt, but there's none. So you're kind of stuck using this in 800 by 600, and a lot of that probably has to do with Terry really relying on very basic GPU, the very basic GPU, virtual GPU that is used on virtual machines anyways. So yeah, around here, effectively all that's left is to, start up his operating system and actually have it installed. And it goes through a pretty fast install. All of it is done through a script that he wrote, and within like a matter of like literally 10 seconds, you're done. So now it's time to unmount that drive that you installed Temple OS with and reboot. And when you reboot it, boy oh boy, do you get the question. Terry has his own bootloader as far as I know, like he doesn't tap into anything open source. The way that it works is Terry asks you if you want to boot off the old boot record, it never worked for me, drive C and drive D. Loading in both C and D does the same thing, okay? Like, it boots into the same operating system. I don't know what the key difference is, so honestly, I just go with drive C because it's, what the root should be. But yeah, once you load it in, it starts decompressing a dictionary, which takes, again, a second, and then you can take a tour of the operating system. Now, the operating system is very, very basic in terms of how it's designed. At any moment, you can hit F5 on your keyboard, and you can compile whatever is in that window, as far as I see. So you can actually start programming nearly immediately as you jump into the entire thing. As far as shell prompts and things like that are considered, I don't think it didn't really launch me into an entire shell to begin with, but it does have a shell. It does have its command line system, so to speak. On the right, you can see a little window pop up that basically tells you can, in fact, left click, right click, do whatever you want. So there is mouse support in Temple OS. So in many ways, it's future-proof, and in a lot of ways, it's fucking lacking. And I might be like, but Muda, does God let you game on Temple OS? Oh, boys, you gamers. Of course God lets you game on the operating system, silly. Terry's got a whole bunch of them that he's programmed by himself, for all things. And some of these are fucking impressive, which we'll get to. Now, Terry has these classified under fun games, unfun games, code scraps, and miscellaneous extra tools that are never meant to be games to begin with. I think it's safe to say we should go cover all of them. So here's Titanium, which is a scrolling shooter from the era, and as you can see, full graphics and everything. I'm flying over a city, just blowing all these tiny pixels out. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it does in fact. And it crashed, by the way. It actually did crash on me. I don't know why it crashed. Maybe the 6 gigs of memory I gave the operating system wasn't enough to contain such fucking holiness. But it also spiked at like 16 percent CPU usage on one core. Now, remind you that this did in fact detect all my multiple cores. It doesn't scale well across multiple cores. Terry pretty much uses one core, and all the other cores that you give it pretty much use 1% of it, which is like nothing. Like, those cores are dormant. You could pass this thing as many threads as you want, but I don't think Terry really developed multi-threaded applications that effectively. Now here's Black Diamond. Now this is basically skiing, except I couldn't control it and there was like literally no fucking collision detection. But the map did scroll, so that's kind of cool. Nothing really that impressive. There's also Flap Bat. You might be wondering what the fuck is Flap Bat. And Flap Bat is basically me flapping my wings and trying to eat these tiny particles that all pretty much statically flow in the wind. The whole goal is to eat all of these particles. And do you think that I did it? Oh, hell yeah, dude. I beat the first fucking level entirely. Look at this shit. There was one up there. Now, there is a problem with this, okay? You have to spam the space key in, like, perfect momentum to do this, alright? Because that's how it works, right? You have to, like, rhythmically tap it so that the bird can fly. I'm kind of failing right here, but eventually I get the hang of such gaming, and I eventually beat the level. So that was my first and probably only game that I ever finished on Temple OS. Here's Varoom, and this is crazy. Full 3D driving engine. You got a 3D model and everything. You are actually driving in the world of Temple OS. So, again, may I remind you, Terry programmed all these games on his own. Terry programmed the fucking driving game into it, and it works pretty well. It has some collision problems, yes, and I hit a game over, but he got a full driving system in, man. Come on. You gotta be impressed by that to an extent. I don't know what this has to do with God, by the way. I don't know if God really planned on F1 racing cars back in the day, but sure. Now, you may be noticing there's no sound. And yeah, you're right, there is no fucking sound. What can I say? Now, this is like Flat Top or Fish Top or something, and it looks like Battleship, but I had no idea what the fuck I was doing. It looked like I was just... I was way out of my depth here. I think what's going on is, like, each ship has to send out, like, missiles to blow up each other, but I have no idea. Okay, like, some of these games are, like, way above my pay grade. Bomber Golf is the next big game, and as you can imagine, it is a game all about flying a stealth bomber above enemy lines, as far as I know. So you gotta blow up the pink tanks, driving as the blue stealth jet, and I didn't know what exactly to do over here. Like, I guess one thing changes your entire direction, but the bomber can actually be moved in this, like, open area. And you can, in fact, drop the bombs. I just couldn't figure out the key, and I also couldn't figure out the objective, really. And it also doesn't seem like there's any difficulty in this at all, Terry Davis, if you were still alive, because there's nothing shooting me from above. Maybe I'm on the first level, maybe that's how it works, but my CPU spikes were the highest during this game, so there's a lot of fucking back-end calculations going on the stealth bomber, that's for sure. Alright, so this is a basketball game that Terry has, and can I just be real with you? This is like basic artificial intelligence. It's a bunch of Roblox characters. I mean,